Our topic for today is about identifying and analyzing and journalizing. So, in the accounting process, the first thing that we need to do is to identify and analyze transaction, no? Identify and analyze transactions. Okay? Ano po ba ginagawa natin on identifying and analyzing? Here, on this particular stage or phase or step of the accounting process, we need to identify our guide, no, that our guide question in the identifying and analyzing step of the accounting process is whether or not, no, whether or not the whether or not the transaction is accountable or not. Okay? No? Oh, that is the only guide question that we need to answer, no? Whether or not the transaction is accountable or not. Okay? Ano po ba accountable? Wrong spelling, no? Accountable or not. Ano po ba ang sinasabi nating accountable transactions? Okay? We cannot answer the question if we cannot identify first what is accountable transaction. Pag sinabi po nating accountable transaction, generally it is a transaction affecting the elements, no, of accounting, no. So affecting the elements of accounting. What are the elements of accounting? This is your second question, no? From the question that we have, whether or not the transaction is accountable or not. Okay? Nagkaroon ka ng tanong, what is an accountable transaction? And we able to answer that. That an accountable transaction is a transaction that affects the elements of accounting. Ngayon, nang na-define natin what is accountable transaction, another question is coming into our mind. And that is, what are the elements of accounting? Okay. So the elements of accounting are, no? Okay, of accounting are, okay, we have the assets, that's number one. We have the liabilities, okay. We have the equity, or in other books, they considered as the capital. Then we have the income, and then we have the expenses. Okay? Yun po yung sinasabing accountable transactions. Oh, I mean elements of accounting rather, no? When we can say ngayon, 'di ba? We have already identified the elements of accounting. Another question that will come into your mind is that alam ko po that we need to identify whether or not it is an accountable transaction. Sunod na tanong mo, what is an accountable transaction? An accountable transaction are those transactions affecting the elements of accounting. From the definition, another question pop up in your mind, and that question is, what are the elements of accounting? And we were able to answer that the elements of accounting are the assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expenses. Ngayon naman, problema po natin, what are those elements? How are we going to identify that this thing is an element of accounting? Okay? If it is an element of accounting, when we can say that the thing we considered as an element of accounting is an asset, a liability, an equity, an income, or an expense. Okay? So we need to define first what is an asset. Okay? What is an asset? Pag sinasabi po nating asset, these are controlled. Okay? This is the first characteristic that we can identify, no? Okay? Whether the thing is an asset or not. Una, an asset is a controlled thing. Ibig sabihin, the company, the business organization, or you yourself as the proprietor of a business organization, you control that thing. No? Ibig sabihin, you have the control over that thing. You can decide how to use it, when to um, disperse it, when to recognize it, um, when to keep it, or no, when to set aside it. No, you have the control over that thing. But hindi lang po doon nagtatapos yung description, no, or characteristic of an asset. Ang asset dapat din meron po tayong tinatawag na other from control. It is necessary that there is a benefit, no, benefit from it. We can say it is an asset if the company controls it and there is a benefit. To be precise, what the benefit that I am referring to is the economic benefit that will flow to the business organization. No, flow, papasok to the business organization. You control a particular asset, and then from that, from controlling it, you can able to earn something, and to earn or to gain a benefit from it, no, okay, and that benefit, to be more precise, an economic benefit that will flow to the business organization. Another characteristic in order for us determine that an asset is that it can be measured, no, it can be measured. Dapat we can measure it reliably, in a reliable measurement, no. Take note, as characteristic of I mean as one of its assumption, no, we have the tinatawag na monetary value assumption, okay, that each item in the accounting must be measurable, okay, measurable, and the measurement, because we are in the Philippines, we are going to measure it in pesos. So for an asset to be considered as an asset, it is controlled, there is an economic benefit that will flow to the business organization, and it can be measured reliably. We can reliably measure that asset. If those characteristics cannot be observed, no, on that particular thing, we can easily say that the thing that we are trying to identify is not an asset. Hindi po natin pwedeng sabihin na we control it but we don't have any benefit and it cannot be measured. So we can say na asset yun agad. Hindi. Dapat yung tatlong characteristics na yun is present on that particular thing. Okay? How about liabilities? Once we say liabilities, these are obligations, no? Pag sinabi po nating liabilities, these are obligations, okay? These are obligation, mga responsibilidad natin. That is another synonyms for obligation, but the appropriate term is an obligation, no? Once we say again um, liabilities, this refers to obligation. Okay? Naiintindihan? Okay? Obligation. Ano po ba ang iibig sabihin ng obligation, no? Okay? No? The obligations must be a present obligation. Okay? It must be a present obligation. Hindi po obligations from the past. Okay? Kundi current today, that this obligation is existing today. From the time you are going to record a liability, that obligation really exists from the time you record it. Okay, that is a present obligation. And when present obligation exists, take note, the present obligation that is existing, okay, currently and presently, must come from a past transaction. Okay. Bakit po dapat from past transaction? Sinasabi po natin yon na the present obligation is coming from a past transaction is that hindi naman po pwedeng nagkautang ka kung hindi ka umutang before. The, umutang ka before, that is the past transactions, that's why you have an utang today. Okay? So that is what I'm trying to say, no? Hindi po pwedeng nagkaroon ka ng utang ngayon na wala ka namang ginawang transaction before. Okay? So, it is very logical lang naman, no? That a present obligation that that results that resulted is coming from a past transaction. Okay? And another characteristic of a liability is that there is an outflow of resources. Future outflow. Future outflow. Okay? Future outflow. Bakit may future outflow of resources? Okay? Ibig sabihin po ng future outflow is that at at the at on the sa future, no, for example, okay, yesterday we were able to have a make utang. That's the past transaction. So today we have a present obligation. Tomorrow is the future date. Tomorrow we will pay it. So may future outflow because meron po tayong ilalabas na resources, a future outflow of resources. Okay? And the last characteristic of a liability, that it can be measured. Dapat meron ding measurement ang liability. Apat po ang dapat nating intindihin or dapat parating ilagay sa ating utak that a liability is a present obligation coming from a past transaction, and later on in the future there will be an outflow of resources. At purpose ng outflow of resources is for able to us to settle any obligation. Settle, ibig sabihin, mabayaran natin yung utang, ma-extinguish yung utang, mawala yung utang. That is the purpose why we will have an outflow of resources in the future. And then, that obligation that we have presently can be measured reliably. Okay? So that is how we describe a liability. Okay, so we have the two elements. The third element is the capital or the equity. The capital is just the net, okay, the net amount, no, net amount of assets after deducting liabilities. Simply, that is asset minus liabilities. So, ibig sabihin, if the total assets being deducted by the total liabilities, whatever yung natira or remainder, that is the equity. That is the capital. Take note from that definition, from that equation, we can easily identify what equity means. No, a characteristic of an equity is that those are assets owned by the business, personally owned by the business already. Kasi from the total assets, hindi naman lahat ng assets ikaw yung may-ari, kasi yung iba niyan inutang, 'di ba? Kaya nga, as I define assets, this only refers to those controlled resources. It is not necessary that you own the asset. It is necessary lang that you control the asset so that you can consider that as an asset. Okay? Kasi the rest of the asset, possibly inutang mo lang. Okay? So, in order for us to determine which among the assets is considered equity and which among the asset we really owned, we need to deduct the total liabilities from the total assets. Because after deducting the total liabilities to the total assets, yung natitira is the equity. And those equity, yun po yung pinagmamay-ari ng business owner. Ibig sabihin, ito lang talaga ang naiambag niya. This is the only assets coming from his own pocket. Naiintindihan? Okay? So, once we say equity, we can simply say that it is the net amount of assets after deducting liabilities, or simply the remainder of the total assets after deducting any liabilities. How about an income? Income, these are increase in assets, okay? Assets and a decrease in liabilities. Okay, take note, no? It can be an increase in assets or a decrease in liabilities. Take note, there is an income if we believe that our assets is nadadagdagan. If we believe that the assets that we have is keep on increasing from 100,000, the total asset happened to be 120, the additional 20,000 is an income because it is an increase on the assets. On the other hand, it can be considered as well as a liability kasi kung yung utang natin na 100,000 nabawasan yan ng 20,000 naging 80, the decrease on the liability can be considered as an income, but for certain and exceptional cases lamang. Okay? Take note ha, hindi po lahat ng decreases on liabilities are considered income kasi may tendency that we decreases our liabilities due to payment, no, due to payment of those liabilities. There are certain situations that once we decrease the liability, it is considered as income. But for certain transactions only, ha? Take note, for certain transaction only. If we say expenses naman, this yun yung kabaliktaran ng income. That is a decrease in asset, this is the decrease in asset, and or increase in liabilities. Okay? Decrease in asset. For example, the total assets that you have happen to 100 to be 100,000, and then later on 20,000 of the 100,000 was already used, nagamit na po natin. Ibig sabihin, the total assets decreases because of the usage of the 20,000. It means that the 20,000 decrease in the total asset is an expense kasi ginamit na po natin yon, and we cannot able to have an inflow on that anymore, no. It cannot be considered as an asset anymore because we cannot have any economic benefit from the used asset. Kaya nga sinasabi natin that an expense is a decrease in asset, or it is an increase in liabilities kasi nakagamit tayo pero hindi natin nabayaran, kaya nga ginamit natin itong mga empleyado natin on their labor services nila. However, we cannot able to pay them because we don't have enough assets. Instead, sinabi nating utang lang muna, but because we used already their skills, we are able to recognize liability, an additional liability on the part of the business organization. Kaya, pwede po rin masabi that the expenses are those increases in liabilities. But not all increases in liabilities are considered a liability kasi nga, pwedeng nag-increase ang liability kasi nagdagdag ka ng utang. Yung utang na yon is not related to any incurrence, okay, or occurrence of a particular, oh no, incurrence, occurrence, or usage of a particular asset. Okay? So those are the elements. Okay, going back to the guide questions, well, okay, of identifying pa lang, no, whether or not the transaction is accountable or not. Our answer for this is that in identifying, okay, is that only accountable transactions are subject to accounting. Okay? Okay? So, only accountable transactions, okay, are subject to the accounting process. Okay? Are subject to accounting process. Sir, how about those non-accountable transaction? Those non-accountable transaction will not undergo to the accounting process, but it shall be considered as part of accounting reporting. No, why it is part of the account of reporting? Some of the non-accountable transaction may be subject for accounting reporting because there are tendencies that those non-accountable transaction may affect the users, no, of this accounting information in making of their economic decisions. Hindi po kasi lahat naman ng transaction is makakapture ng accounting process. Kasi may possibility it cannot be measured reliably. Wala pong measurement. So we cannot enter that in the books. Pero we need to take note that because may tendency that those transactions we consider non-accountable are very much material, okay, in the preparation of economic decisions. Okay? Yung sinasabi ko lang po is that only accountable transactions are subject to accounting process. Ibig sabihin, siya lang po ang magtutuloy-tuloy hanggang dulo. And I am not saying that those non-accountable transaction, no, is not part of the accounting reporting. Take note ha, mag-iba po ang accounting process and accounting reporting. For accounting reporting, both accountable and non-accountable transactions are subject to reporting, particularly those non-accountable transactions that we consider material, substantial in making economic decisions. Okay? So, those are the important things that we consider. How do we analyze? No, analyzing. So we are now on analyzing the accountable transaction. We will only focus on the accountable transactions kasi only those accountable transactions are subject to the accounting process. Okay? So how do we analyze? No? Okay. We are going to analyze by answering the question what what value, what is the value received, no, and what is the value parted with. Okay, value parted with. Yun po yung tanong na dapat nating masagutan, no, on analyzing what value is received and what value is being parted with, no. Yun po ang dapat nating masagot. Ano po ba, sir, yung value received? Okay? Ibig sabihin ng value received, these are the things that we personally receive from the transaction. Okay? Usually, these are considered the debits. Okay? The debits. Okay? Trivia lang, debits is from a foreign word. Foreign, no? I am not quite sure if it is Greek or Latin, but I knew it is a foreign word. That the origin of that word, no, is the word deberi. Deberi. Okay? Deberi. Which stands for value received. Kaya nga, sinasabi po natin that those debited are those value that we receive. Okay? Those values that we receive. Okay? Those are the debits. And then, we have what we call the value parted with. No? Okay? Yung napalayo sa atin or nawala sa atin. No? That is the literal definition of value parted with. Pag sinabi pong value parted with, this refers to the credits. And the foreign word, the origin of this word is crederi. Crederi. Take note, ha? Okay? Crederi. And it is defined or it means as yung value parted with. So, ibig sabihin, okay, to make short, no, the value received, the value parted with, we can able to say debits and credits. So, in analyzing, we need to identify what is the debit and what is the credit. Okay? What is the debit? What is the credit? Okay. To simply analyze, no, okay, we have again the assets, the liabilities, okay, we have the capital, we have the income, and we have the expenses. Okay, in analyzing, take note ha, okay, these are generic, no? These are generic, no? All assets, okay, all assets, if there is an increase in asset, okay, and I want you to memorize and understand this, okay, diagram that I am presenting you as to the increase and decreases, no, as to the increase and decrease, no, if there is an increase in asset, that is a value received, that is debit. We need to consider that as a debit. Kasi habang nadadagdagan yung asset, ibig sabihin that we are keeping ourselves in receiving a particular items or things. Okay? So that is debit. Habang naman nababawasan yung asset, pinapalabas po natin yung assets. So that is a credit. Okay? So any increase in assets, habang nadadagdagan, if there is an inflow, or another term is an inflow, okay, inflow of asset, may papasok na asset, or increase in asset, or in other, there is an outflow of asset, there is a credit. Okay? How about, sir, in liabilities? When we can say that there is an increase in liabilities. There is an increase in liabilities if it is on the credit side. Okay? If if an increase in liabilities, once we prepare, oh no, once we record, no, in the subsequent topic, once we are going to analyze already, no, if there is an increase on liabilities, it must be on the credit. That is a value parted with, no, that is a value parted with. If there is a decrease in liability, that is a debit. An outflow of liability, papalabas na liability, that is debit. On the capital side naman, if there is an increase on the capital of the company, there is credit. And then, if there is an outflow of capital, that is debit. On income, if there is an increase on income, that is credit. And if there is a decrease on income, that is debit. And then on the expenses, if there is an increase on the expense or usage, it must be debited. And on the outflow of expenses, or there is a decrease on the expense, it must be credited. Okay? those are those rules are very much important on analyzing. But the question that we need to identify lang is, what is the value received from the particular transaction, and what is value parted with in a particular transaction. For example, no, I will give you an example. For example, okay, a basic example is that, okay, no, a student, okay, receive, oh no, let's focus on a student lang muna na transaction. Mr. A student, received cash from his parents. No? What is the value received or the debit? No? The value received by Mr. A is what we called cash. Naka-receive po siya ng cash, no? And that is our debit. No? Because Mr. A received cash from his parents. On the point of view, ito ni point of view ni Mr. A. Point of view of Mr. A, no? On the point of view of Mr. A received cash, and value parted with, or yung credit niya, take note, nung naka-receive siya ng cash, it is not coming from his own pocket, but from others' pocket, particularly his parents. No? He received cash, at the same time he will recognize it as an income, no? Pwedeng income kasi hindi naman galing sa kanya yon. Okay? It is considered as income. Okay? It is considered as income. Kasi, nagkaroon po ako ng kita dahil binigyan ako ng pera ng nanay ko. Okay? That is an income. You have a zero asset. However, your asset increases because of someone provided you such asset. Okay? No, that is an income on your part. So, your debit will be cash, and then your credit would be an income coming from a donation. Kasi binigay, gratuitous, no? It was donated to you, okay, by your parent without any consideration. Okay. How about, sir, on the point of the parents giving such cash? On the point of the parent giving such cash is that the value received is there is an increase on the expense, no? Expense sa kanila 'yon. Kasi nagdagdagan sila ng paggagastusan. Okay? O, no? Paggagastusan. It is an expense on their part. There is an increase on their expense on the viewpoint, no? On the viewpoint of the parents. Okay? On the point of view, no? Of the parents. On the point of view of the parents, the value received is an expense. Okay, ano po kayang expense yan? O pwede po natin yan, no? Um, school expense, no? Or sabihin na lang natin na ano magandang term dyan, an expense, okay, school allowance expense on the part of the parents, no? Okay, we can particular say that is a school allowance expense. Tama? Okay, that is a school allowance expense. Ano naman yung value parted with? Okay, take note, their value parted with on the point of view of the parent is cash. Kasi nagbigay sila ng cash. Their assets in a form of cash decreases. So that is the value parted with. That is cash. That is how are we going to analyze, no? To always determine what is the value received and what is the value parted with on the transaction, but depending on the point of view. Dito, I provided two different point of view kasi the transaction, iba yung point of view ni A who received the cash, and then iba sa point of view ni parents who provided the cash. Take note, ha? Sir, are those two point of views can be um, recorded in the same books? No, because Mr. A is a different person. The parents are different persons. Diba? We have the accounting entity assumption. Oo, going back, no, we can apply on this, no, the accounting entity assumption. That is how are we going to analyze, no? Take note, ano kaya ang na-receive ko? Ano kaya ang nag-increase sa akin? Ano kaya ang nag-decrease sa akin? Okay, pwede po natin gawing tanong 'yon. Okay, from the transaction, what did I earn? Ano yung nadagdag sa akin? Ano ang nabawas? Kasi parati po yung dagdag bawas, dagdag bawas, dagdag bawas. Pero parating may nadadagdag, parating may nababawas. Kasi sabi pa nga sa bawat pumapasok sa buhay natin, merong lumalabas. Oo, kasi twofold effect po kasi ang accounting. If merong nag-i-increase, merong nagdi-decrease. Naiintindihan po ba? Guys.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's proceed to the last part. No, and I'm going to finish already on the last part. Okay, journalizing. Okay. In journalizing, okay, because we have already identified the transaction to be accounted, we have already determined on how we are going to analyze the accountable transaction. Now, how are we going to journalize the transaction? According uh, to rules, no, in accounting, okay, um, the acceptable system on recording the transaction is what we call the double entry system. Take note, ha, we are going to use the double entry system. Yung double entry system uses the twofold effect, no? Twofold effect. Okay? Kaya nga, twofold effect kasi we need to determine the increase part and the decrease part at the same time. Oo, no? We are in the philosophy saying that sa bawat increase na meron tayo, there is always a decrease. Or sometimes sa bawat increase, merong additional increase na naman. Kung isa nag-increase, posible may increase din sa isa. No? Twofold, parating dalawa yung effect. Hindi lang po yung effect sa isa. parating may kapares. Kaya nga, double entry system. There is a twofold effect. That is the philosophy of a double entry system. We always consider that at every transaction that we are analyzing, there is a twofold effect. And what is the twofold effect? Going back to the analysis that we have, and that is the debit and the credit. Parati pong may debit and credit. Take note ha, parati pong may debit, parating may credit. That's the twofold effect of the double entry system. Parati pong may debit, parati pong may credit. Sir, is there any instances or circumstances or situation that may happen na yung isang transaction, dalawa yung debit, isa lang yung credit? Pwede. Pwede po yun. Meron po bang transaction na isa lang yung debit pero marami ang credit? Pwede. Okay? Make sure lang po natin parating may debit, may credit. Regardless kung ilang debit, regardless kung ilang credit. Kasi yung target ng double entry system is that to make sure that there is always a debit side and a credit side. Yun po ang point ng double entry system. Okay. Another rule that we need to remember under journalizing, guys, is that, okay, make sure that the debit, okay, is always equal to the credit. Okay? The debit is always equal to the credit. Ano po ba ibig sabihin ng rule na to on the double entry system? That the total value, kasi we have in journalizing, we can able to measure already the amounts, ano, in a peso. Okay? The assets, the liabilities, the equity, and the capital. The rule is that the total value, if we're going to sum all debits na meron tayo, assuming in a particular transaction, there are two debits, and then there is only one credit, dapat pag i-total natin lahat ng debit, the totality of debits must equal to the totality of the credit. That is very important, that the total debit is always equal to the total credit. Wag po nating kakalimutan yan. Kasi minsan, students can easily analyze, but on the process of journalizing, nagkakamali na kasi they cannot able to balance the debit from the credit. Take note, the debit shall always equal to the value of the credits. That's the rule. Okay, that is a very important rule. Okay, again, a double entry system is a twofold effect kasi merong debit, merong credit, and not only that, we need to make sure that the debit is always equal to the credit. Sa journalizing pa lang, we need to make sure that the debit is always equal to the credit. Sir, paano po ginagawa yung journal entry? Okay, we are now entering on the formal recording of transactions. And what the formal recording of transaction is what we call journal entry. A journal entry composed of a debit, a credit, and an explanation, no? But the indispensable, hindi po pwedeng mawala na element on a journal entry is the debit and the credit and its values, mga measures, mga amounts. Hindi po pwedeng mawala yon, no? Okay? The journal entry, again, this is the formal, okay, recording of an accountable transaction. Okay? And the composition is a debit and a credit and an explanation. Okay? But we will not focus on the explanation kasi yung explanation pwedeng gemma-gemma lang yon. Okay? But we will focus on the debit and the credit. Okay. Under journal entry, we need to make sure muna, always identify from the transaction ano po ang dapat i-debit. Okay? I already provided you the rules when to debit, when to credit on a particular element. Okay? No? Element po yun, ha? And each element, by the way, no? Each element has different account titles. Account titles po ang gagamitin natin on the preparation of journal entry, not the name of the element. Instead, the account title. Okay? Make sure to identify first the debit, then after identifying the debit and its corresponding values, identify the credit. That's the rule, ha? That's the rule again. Once we are going to prepare the journal entry, always identify first what are the debits, okay, and what are the credits, okay. After identifying what are the debits and identifying what are the credits, we can now officially and formally record the transaction. Okay, how are we going to do the recording? Una, we write the debit. For example, no, Giselle bought banana 1,000 pesos, di ba? Okay, that is the transaction. Aling Giselle, no, bumili ng banana, okay, for his own consumption, okay, no? Lagyan natin ng apelyido para mas maganda. Giselle di magiba-giba. Charot, no? Okay. Giselle bought banana. Okay, that is the transaction. So, we are going to analyze what is the value received from buying, no? The value received is the banana, no? Giselle received banana and it is the debit because banana is an asset. Oh, it is an asset because she can control it. She can able to have an economic benefit from it because once she eat that, no, magkakaroon siya ng energy. That's the economic benefit. And then there is a value of that banana, o di ba? Ang mahal ng banana, 1,000. Di ba? 1,000. Okay? So, from that, that would be our value received and that is an asset. So our entry, so the appropriate account title, we can use naman banana, but it must for formality's sake, no, we can say that food supplies. Oh, no. Pwedeng supplies. Pero to make it more specific, food supplies, that would be our debit. That would be our debit. That is 1,000 pesos. Okay. Food supplies, inuna ko yung debit, ha. Hanapin yung debit. That is 1,000. And then, we have the credit. Okay. Wala naman pong other debit from the transaction. Yung susunod pong gagawin is the credit. Para masabing credit na po tayo sa journal entries, we need to make sure na i-indent na po natin. Sir, what if kung marami pong debits? Kung marami pong debits, dapat lahat ng debit are in same margin, no? Ibig sabihin, nakapantay lang silang lahat, no? Pantay. For example, assuming na hindi lang food supplies yung binili ni Giselle, kundi bumili din siya ng medical kits. So, medical supplies, assuming kasi these are two different assets and two different types of supplies, and these are two different debits. So, medical supplies, okay? So, dalawang debits, pero naka-hilera ng hilera lang sila in the same manner. Okay, that is the assumption pag maraming debits. Okay. Pero, okay, going back to the first assumption that we have, no? Okay, kasi isa lang naman yung supply na binili natin and that is the specific supply is food. That is a food supply. That would be our specific account title. We will now then proceed to the credit. Sir, from the journal entry, when we can say that this entry is the credit already, okay? Take note ha, hindi po pwedeng maghiwalay si debit and credit, no? Naglalagyan mo ng space, credit na. Hindi po pwede yon, no? After the debit, make sure that after writing all the debits, we need to write the credits. In order for us to determine that this is the credit side already, we need to make indention. I-indent mo. Oo, hindi naman isang 1 meter na indention, 2 inches na indention, as long as naka-indent lang. Okay? clear na naka-indent. Once it is indented, we can identify immediately na ito ay credit na. Okay? We can identify already na credit na to siya. Okay? So, if that is the credit, no? Ano po yung credit kaya natin dito, no? Bumili po siya ng banana for 1,000. Ano kaya ang nag-decrease on the part of Giselle? Remember, once you bought banana, you disburse cash. So, nabawasan ka ng cash. So, that is your credit. Decrease on asset is a credit. So, there is a credit on cash of 1,000. Naka-indent din yon, no? This is the debit, this is the credit, debit, credit. And the rule, the debit and the credit must always be equal. 1,000 sa debit, 1,000 sa credit. The balance of debit and credit must always remain. Okay? That's how are we going to prepare a journal entry. We need to recognize first the debit with its corresponding amount and the credit with its corresponding amount. And then we need to make sure that the total credit debit, this is the debit, is equal to the total value of the credit. For explanation purposes, you need to make indentation as well. Indent mo na naman, bought banana. Oh, pwede na yon, no? Wag mo nang gawing mahaba. And the explanation does not need to be in a paragraph form. Simply 2 to 3 words is enough. Okay? But it can be eliminated naman, no? Pero for the purpose of for academic purposes, kasi yun talaga yung tatlo, no? We have the debit, we have the credit, and the explanation. And each is being indented. Okay? So, those are the topics that we need to learn for today. The analyzing, the identifying, and journalizing transactions. So, that's it for today. And I will give you activity, okay, so that you can able to experience how to identify, analyze, and journalize transaction. Okay? Thank you and God bless. Okay?
Thank you, sir.